I was on the field for day 7 of Buffalo Bills training camp, and I'm here to share all of my top observations with you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, folks, welcome in. Day 7, Bills camp in the books. I got plenty to discuss regarding my top observations from taking in this practice, but we have to start our conversation today by discussing the safety position. It was certainly the biggest question mark entering training camp, and through 7 days of practice, those questions have only intensified. So let's get into it. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, no longer with the team. Taylor Rapp back on a 3-year deal. He's one of your starters. And then you have this competition between Mike Edwards as a free agent signing, Cole Bishop as a second-round pick, and Damar Hamlin to be the starter, opposite of Rapp. And Sean McDermott told us that the plan was for Mike Edwards to get the first-team reps during the spring in the OTAs. Had a shoulder injury, wasn't available. And then you have the rookie Cole Bishop, and things were really quiet on that front. And so the story coming out of the spring in the OTAs was Damar Hamlin. By all accounts, anyone in attendance at those OTA practices will tell you that Damar Hamlin was a standout. And so he gets the first opportunity in training camp to run alongside Taylor Rapp, and he's firmly in the mix to be the starter. But also firmly in competition with Mike Edwards, who was now healthy, and Cole Bishop. Well, it doesn't take long for things to change fast in the NFL, where Mike Edwards is injured with a hamstring injury. He's week to week. And then we see Cole Bishop on the Tuesday practice, went down with an injury, was seen with his arm wrapped after practice. And now we know that he is now week to week with a shoulder injury. So a 3-way battle for this safety job opposite of Taylor Rapp is definitely looking a lot different right now, with Damar Hamlin the only contender that is healthy and available. Now, let's pause and acknowledge that maybe Damar Hamlin was always going to win the job, and any panic about the safety position is really just about the depth. And Damar Hamlin is the most experienced player at safety in this defense, entering his 4th season. Of course, last year was funky, but the year before he got a lot of playing time before the event in Cincinnati. And it feels like with all the dynamics surrounding the recovery, physically and mentally, he's kind of in a good spot to get back to really focusing in on football and settling in and competing for a job. And so maybe he's the guy. But you have a second-round pick that's a rookie, and you have a veteran free agent in Mike Edwards who's played a lot of football, a lot of high-stakes football, and played well. And so it's an interesting dynamic. And then, of course, the Bills signed earlier in the week Kareem Jackson. And the prevailing thought that I have about that addition of Kareem Jackson, who was a 2010 first-round pick, who has literally been a starter every single season since 2010, over 190 starts at corner and then safety since 2019. At 36 years old, It is not my belief that Kareem Jackson signed with the Buffalo Bills so that he can cover kicks and punts. I believe that Kareem Jackson has some level of understanding or belief that he has a chance to be a starter for this team. And he got a chance to work in today during practice. Obviously, there's a curve ahead, but the Bills don't play a game until September 8th. It's August 1st. Then, of course, the Bills signed Terrel Burgess. That's happened since we've last had a conversation. 2020 third-round pick out of Utah by the Rams. And he lasted 2 seasons with the Rams. Then he spent a year with the Giants and a year with the Commanders, if I'm not mistaken. That's his career trajectory. But a third-round pick, players are picked in the third round because I think there's a perception that they can be an eventual starter. I graded Terrel Burgess coming out of Utah as a third-round pick, so a guy that I viewed as an eventual starter. So the safety room looks really different, and it feels like the competition's a lot different than maybe we thought it would be a week ago. New bodies in place and contending bodies injured. So we'll see how it all plays out. There's obviously the Micah Hyde piece of this conversation, where a couple months ago, you thought to yourself, well, if the Bills need Micah Hyde, it's nice to have him on speed dial and they can give him a call. Well, kind of feels like maybe those things that happened that would be necessary to give Micah Hyde a call have happened. But then you have to look at this through the lens of Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde, first of all, uncertain on if he wants to play football again. We don't know the answer to that. And we can certainly speculate and guess with Micah Hyde's age and tenure that his appetite for going to St. John Fisher and participating in training camp is probably pretty low. And so I would anticipate if Micah Hyde was part of the solution for the Bills, that it wouldn't happen right now. It would potentially be at some point after the Bills break training camp. And is that a few days after? Is that weeks after? Is that into the season? We don't know. But we know that the door is not shut. And it, as I've said repeatedly, it feels like the longer it remains open, the more likely it is. And depending on how Edwards and Bishop work back from injury, depending on how Burgess and Jackson settle in, that would probably impact what the Bills would do with Micah Hyde. I don't think this is an ideal situation, but I don't think there's any reason to panic. And that goes back to the conversation that we had before free agency even started. Safety is just not a position to panic over. Whether it's Sean McDermott's unbelievable resume with safeties dating back to his time with the Eagles and the Panthers and the Bills. I mean, his resume is off the charts, so to me, he gets the benefit of the doubt. But just survey the situation. Taylor Rapp, he's good to go. Damar Hamlin's good to go. D. Delaney is a player that I feel like is dismissed in this conversation, but he's played a lot of football over the last 3 years. Not a nothing player in the NFL. They signed Kareem Jackson. They signed a recent third-round pick in Terrel Burgess. Don't forget that Cam Lewis is still around. And I think you've already seen some of the domino effect here with Cam Lewis, where to this point, he put a lot of his practice time in at the slot corner position. Well, today he played safety. Don't forget that guy's around. And so there's so many interesting layers to this, but I don't think panic is appropriate. There's options. There's proven pedigree in terms of coaching, and there's time. The Bills play on September 8th. If Edwards and Bishop are week to week, there's a chance they could come back on August 14th or even August 20th, and that would give them enough time to ramp up and get ready to play. So I think with those guys being week to week, it's somewhat encouraging that they'd be back with enough time to ramp up for the season. But at the same time, the Bills still have options. And at the same time, Sean McDermott still has the resume of coaching safeties that rivals any coach in the NFL, that gives me a level of comfort in knowing that the Bills will be able to figure this out. Just like Sean McDermott has literally every season of his career. So there's the reasons for optimism there. All right, coming up on the other side of it, I want to talk some of my defensive observations from day 7 of camp. And then later on, we'll talk offensive observations. Folks, be sure to stick with me. The NFL season is here. I'm sure you're excited, and I'm sure you want to get to Highmark Stadium to watch the Bills, or maybe an away game, or maybe another game throughout the United States. Well, if you want to get to football games this fall, you need to download the Game Time app. Game Time is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. The app is awesome. It's easy to navigate. They give you flash deals. They give you last-minute ticket specials. They give you a seat view so you know exactly what to expect when you get to the venue. And my favorite thing is the all-in pricing. You never have to worry about surprise processing fees coming in at the end of the transaction. You get the all-in price from the beginning of the purchase. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, so as we get into my defensive observations, let's start by talking about Cam Lewis and him getting more run at safety, which makes a lot of sense. The domino effect there is different players getting run at slot corner. And so Taron Johnson, of course, the Bills' starting slot corner. But after him, Jamarcus Ingram continues to get time there. And I think that's a big deal. I think Jamarcus Ingram, as a player that brings special teams value, plus the ability to play outside corner, plus the ability to play in the slot, is very good for him. And I think he's going to make this roster, and I think the versatility is a big deal, and I think it's good for him to get more reps in different spots. So, right, there's always a consequence to a guy getting injured, is that other players get opportunities. And I think for Jamarcus Ingram, this is very valuable. You've also seen Daquan Hardy, Bills draft pick out of Penn State, get some work in the slot, and they've tinkered with him in a number of different ways in terms of getting work with the starters. And I think that's important because as the Bills try to sort out who their punt returner is going to be, and Daquan Hardy is firmly in that conversation, making sure that if needed, Hardy can function defensively is an important box for them to check. And so you'll see just randomly he'll get a few reps with the starters, and you're like, wow, that's different. And then you think, well, it's probably part of the evaluation process to make sure that if needed, he can step in and play a little slot corner if he's going to be the Bills' primary punt returner. You also saw Corey Couch get some reps, not with the starters, but with the second team defense. And so I think the Bills are tinkering, trying some different guys in the slot and allowing Cam Lewis to play more safety, which is, potentially giving the Bills an opportunity to see more players in the slot, evaluate. And, I think that's the unintended good consequence of some of the injuries that they've had at the safety position. When it comes to the standouts during the day 7 practice on the defensive side of the football, the name that very obviously popped was Ed Oliver. I think earlier in the week, it was the Von Miller day. Earlier in the week before that, it was the Greg Rousseau day. Today was Ed Oliver. And the Bills worked primarily the running offense and then red zone, kind of high red zone, working in from the 20. They would put together some drives and work on that type of stuff. And you could tell that Ed Oliver either can't be blocked or he just knows the Bills' run schemes and knows how to get to the football, because he was a problem. He made it difficult for the offense to function. A lot of quickness, the stuff that you would see from Ed Oliver, quickness, getting to the football, and just being extremely disruptive. I thought this was a signature day for Ed Oliver on the interior defensive line for the Buffalo Bills. So I think it's very encouraging that throughout the course of this week, you have seen different guys on that defensive line kind of steal the show. And, for me, one of my primary concerns with this Bills team is in big critical moments during the regular season and especially in the playoffs, can someone on the defensive line make a big-time impact play that secures a win for the Bills? Thinking about Ed Oliver in that Chargers game, that big sack. Thinking about Von Miller before he was injured and some of those late in the game moments that iced the game for the Buffalo Bills. Who can do that? And maybe the Bills don't have Myles Garrett, right? Or Nick Bosa or Micah Parsons or TJ Watt, one of those guys that can really take over a football game. But I think your hope is that between Rousseau and Von Miller and Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and the depth options that you have, that the sum of all of that can equal the big moments that you need, although it might not just be one guy that always does it. So I think I'm encouraged by all that. I also think it's worth noting that the defensive end 5 competition is really fascinating to me. Your top 4 defensive ends, Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, DeJuan Smoot, AJ Epinesa. And then I think you have Kingsley Jonathan, Casey Tuhill, and Javon Solomon all competing for the job. I think that Jonathan and Solomon have firmly separated themselves from Tuhill. I think Tuhill's a very high effort player. I don't know that there's much to his game. But the guy that keeps popping, if I have to be completely honest with you, is Kingsley Jonathan. I think Kingsley Jonathan, between him and Solomon's had some very good moments. But Jonathan just feels like every practice is around the football, bringing a lot of energy. He's a juice guy. You could tell that him being on the field elevates the energy of the guys. And he's been around. I mean, he's not like a player that's new to the team. He's been around for the last couple of seasons. And so while I think Javon Solomon as a draft pick has the upper hand here, I think Kingsley Jonathan's going to make it tough. Make it very tough on the Bills with their decision-making on who to roster on the defensive ends. I want to talk a little bit about backup defensive tackles and Oliver, Daquan Jones, your starters. They look great. They look great. I know some people had asked me about Daquan Jones. He's moving well. He's bringing energy. There are times where he's able to blow up plays, and you feel really good about where he's at. The backups there, Austin Johnson feels like the number 3 guy. And the Bills drafted Dwayne Carter in the 3rd round, and I think Dwayne Carter's been fine. But it still feels like to me, and I certainly haven't tallied and charted all of this, it certainly feels like to me that Deshaun Williams is getting reps over Dwayne Carter. So I just wanted to call to your attention Deshaun Williams in this defensive tackle rotation as a player to not overlook, and right now it looks like he's the 4th guy. And even Eli Anku is still getting a lot of important reps. So I think the Bills have some pretty good defensive tackle depth, but I don't want you to forget about Deshaun Williams in that conversation. I also thought this was a terrific day, and I mean terrific day for the Bills linebackers and their top 4 linebackers. Terrel Bernard was awesome today. I mean, he was playing so fast and physical and firing downhill, making tackles at or near the line of scrimmage. He was all over the place, even in coverage, like some very competitive moments in the middle of the field, competing for the football. But that dude is playing very confident, and I just thought it was a great practice for him, really defending the run. I mean, very slippery and just making a lot of plays. I thought he was terrific. I thought this was Matt Milano's best practice, looking more and more confident. I thought there were several instances where he was able to get off tackle out towards the sideline near the numbers and making plays in space. Looked Matt Milano-like to me in terms of the energy, the quickness, and really being a space player, which I think has always been Matt Milano's biggest strength. Dorian Williams, I thought, in the run sessions playing downhill, he looks good. Dorian Williams is one of those players. I break out this line from time to time, and I think it applies to Dorian Williams as a run defender. He's one of those guys that will stick his face in a fan and like it. He's an animal defending the run. I got plenty of questions about the coverage, but Dorian Williams playing downhill brings something to this football team. And you saw some times today in practice where the Bills would bring in a fullback or do some heavier personnel packages, and you saw the Bills run 3 linebackers. The 3rd linebacker is Dorian Williams. Every single session, whether it's a day that Matt Milano got a rest day, it was Dorian Williams. On times where the Bills would go with a 3rd linebacker, it's Dorian Williams. It's clearly his job to lose. And I think those moments where he gets to play downhill and be an athlete and use his physicality and use that high motor, he really pops. I thought it was a good day as well for Baylon Spector. I think Baylon Spector's quietly put together a good camp. And I think those are firmly the top 4. I know I've had some praise for Deion Jones and Nicholas Moreau, but as the week kind of played out, I found myself leaning back into Dorian Williams and Baylon Spector for what they've done over the last few days. And I think just watching this team, it feels like the linebackers in general are doing a good job. Feels like it's a pretty deep position, even if there's some guys that are a little bit unproven. Last defensive talking point that I have to get to is Kaiir Elam. Another big day. And a lot of red zone reps. And so I think that helps a guy like Kaiir Elam, kind of condensed areas of the field, not as much spacing, not as much real estate for him to have to think about in zone, and he could just play the ball. And he had I think it was back-to-back red zone reps where he was able to have a pass breakup and just flying around and driving on the football with a lot of confidence. And so they keep working him into the first team. I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know if he's going to rotate in occasionally during the season, but it feels like Kaiir Elam is having a good camp, and at a minimum, he's going to make the Bills think about some rotation at cornerback, and I think that is nothing but a good thing. Brentford and Douglas look good, but Elam is the one I think that is popping in terms of those big splashy moments, and they're showing up every day, and I thought Thursday was just a continuation of that. All right, folks, I want to talk standouts and observations on the offensive side of the football. Be sure to stick with me. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, folks, let's talk offensive observations from day 7 of Buffalo Bills training camp. I'm just going to go with the first thing that I have written down. As the days have went by here at St. John Fisher, and I've had a chance to watch these practices, the more fascinated I become with the tight end depth. And Quentin Morris is the incumbent, but every day, Zach Davidson just makes plays. And when you watch Shane Buechele and Mitch Trubisky run the offense, they throw it to him all the time, and he makes plays. I thought he had some of his most impressive catches of camp yet today, where like some tight contested situations. There was one where he caught the football, and right when he caught it, like he took a pretty big hit. And you could tell he got rocked a little bit, but he stayed focused on the pass and he was able to like catch it after he bobbled it, stay on his feet, and then turn and get in the end zone. Had another play where he was able to kind of get open in the back line of the end zone. And you could tell he's an energy guy. Joe Brady commented on the personality and that he's a one-speed player, and that's full speed. And you can just tell he's got some juice to him. And then you watch Quentin Morris, and the guy's making tough catches as well. And so I don't think the Bills are going to roster 4 tight ends. But I think Zach Davidson is at least making this a conversation with Quentin Morris, and a guy that you're going to love having either of them on your practice squad. So just kind of a low key, like the Bills tight end 3 job is pretty competitive. And I would not sleep on Zach Davidson. Again, nothing wrong with Quentin Morris, but Zach Davidson is forcing you to talk about him. And I think that's a good thing. Khalil Shakir was incredible today. He's been really good all week. I don't feel like I've talked enough about him because you kind of just take for granted that he just catches the ball all the time. But it keeps happening. And my favorite thing about watching Khalil Shakir is I think there's this kind of a silly thought out there that he's this slot only player that just kind of runs choice routes and gets open with leverage. Khalil Shakir makes play after play after play down the field, middle of the field, seam routes. Those skinny posts, I mean, Josh is just layering it in there over and over. And sometimes it's, he's getting a good amount of space and Josh just has to kind of fit it over the top of that second level and he can catch it in stride. But there's other times where there's just a little bit of leverage that's available for Josh Allen to fit the ball. And Khalil Shakir is able to kind of shield off the defender and make tough catches, but multiple highlight reel plays over the middle of the field, working the seam. And Josh Allen, you could just tell, like, he will just step into these throws and just rip it. And Khalil Shakir comes down with it time and time again. He's had one heck of a camp. Like, I have a couple notes here. He got 2 touchdowns, one on a seam route, one on a quick inbreaker where he was able to establish some quick leverage, and Josh just kind of fired it right into his gut. Good practice for Khalil Shakir. He said he's been really good all week. Curtis Samuel, the versatility once again on display. Red zone carries, plenty of them, whether it's jet sweeps or kind of some more traditional carries. You know, I go back to the year that Joe Brady had Curtis Samuel in Carolina, and it was the most carries in a season that Curtis Samuel had. And so I'd anticipate 35, 40 carries, you know, a couple a game out of Curtis Samuel, in addition to some quick stuff in the passing game, in addition to some stuff down the field. They've been using him on deep ends and corner routes. And so the multifaceted playmaking ability of Curtis Samuel continues to shine. And you saw it in some unique ways today when the Bills worked red zone. Dalton Kincaid's really good. You knew that. And so as the Bills continue to really work the ball to the middle of the field, you could see Josh Allen and his confidence in Dalton Kincaid in some tight situations to be able to come down with the football. Had a really impressive touchdown in practice today where 2 defenders were like right there, and Josh fired it in there, and you could see the 2 defenders kind of converge, but Dalton Kincaid was able to hang on to the pass. And so it was another good day for Dalton Kincaid. And just the more I've watched this team practice, the more confidence that I have that 120 targets are coming for Dalton Kincaid and a ton of production. So I know these are some usual suspects, but I don't want to overlook that they continue to make plays. And I thought Keon Coleman was another bright spot today, working the sideline, some really good one-on-one reps against Rasul Douglas. There was he made one really, really outstanding catch along the sideline and showed the body control and got his feet down and actually had a little bit of run after catch. The referees threw a flag for OPI. I passionately disagree with the call. I thought it was not OPI at all. I thought he actually beat him and then caught the ball and made a good play. But that was a good rep and also a corner route that he was able to score a touchdown. And I think that pass might have come from Mitch Trubisky, actually. But Keon Coleman just continues to have moments. And for the most part, he comes down with it. There's been some instances where you could tell I wouldn't say forcing it, but they're giving Keon some chances that are kind of low percentage moments, you know, where he does have to like elevate for the football and box out and win at the catch point. And there's always going to be some variance with that. And I think it's good that they're testing some things and giving him some chances. And you know, it doesn't win every single one, but I think he's winning a whole lot more than he's not. And I think some of those flashes are very, very encouraging. So I just continue to enjoy watching Josh Allen during this training camp and the confidence that he has and how quickly he's able to gain trust and give guys chances to make plays that he doesn't have a lot of time on task with. It's been really fun to watch Josh Allen. And I know he's a superstar quarterback and you expect him to be really good, but I think within the context of what's going on with new offense, new people around him, for Josh to be as confident as he is and for the results to be what they have been, it has been really, really fun to watch. And I think anybody that's been to a training camp practice, any one of these 7 would tell you that, yeah, it was fun watching Josh Allen. And it's just different. Like the Diggs piece of this conversation is so worthwhile to mention. Diggs is a great player, but you're lying to yourself if you don't feel a different vibe around this football team and a different freedom that they have to operate. And I think you just, with Diggs on the field, you're just, eyes are always on him. You're always kind of just wondering what he's going to do, how he's going to respond. That's not there. And it feels like there's like just a heaviness lifted off of this offense right now. And maybe that's me putting it in the spin zone and trying to see an optimistic lens here with Diggs no longer in the picture, but it's hard to not get there, to be honest with you, just being intellectually honest and think to yourself, I mean, Josh is ripping the ball to everybody. He's having fun. They're celebrating like crazy. They're making plays, and there's no longer this heaviness. It's like a heaviness or something that existed. So we'll see how it all translates to the regular season, but you can't help but be impressed by how Josh Allen's running this offense. Last thing that I want to shout out here, at practice today, it was hot. it was a hot day. It's been a hot week. The Bills had a player, Alec Anderson, actually have to go to the hospital due to some heat related stuff. And there's a fan today that was behind me, standing up against the fence and certainly struggling with the heat, kind of fell over, and people around them started to call for help from the medical staff for the Bills. And we all started yelling at the field, hey, somebody needs to come help this person. And so the Bills training staff got over to the person and helped, and they were able to get stabilized. And I thought it was really cool that when things were able to become stable, Josh Allen and Terry Pegula went over to the fan to check in on them and just exchange a few words. And I thought that was a really, really kind gesture from Josh Allen and Terry Pegula. And you didn't even really notice anybody going and telling those two people what happened, but somehow they knew. And when the time was appropriate, they went over and spoke and checked in. And I thought that was a really, really kind gesture from the owner of the Bills and the franchise quarterback for the Bills. And, we're going to talk about what's going on in the field, but I thought that was an observation that was worth noting, and something that, as a person who was there and saw the concern from the people around the person who had some type of heat related issue, it meant a lot to me. I was like, that's really a classy move from Josh and Terry, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you on this podcast. All right, folks. Next up for the Bills, Friday evening, the Blue Red at Highmark Stadium. I'll be there. Very excited to check that out, and I'll get you a podcast afterwards. So that's the next time you'll hear from me. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.